Hi, everyone, and welcome for another GraphCMS Talks. I've really been looking forward to this conversation because we're going to go straight into headless CMSs and why there is so much noise around this and how headless CMSs really fit into scaling business needs. And I'm going to be speaking with Kaya, and you and I have a lot of overlaps on this topic, so of course it's a great topic to get into with you. But before we do that, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a bit about Wordify as well.
Sure. Well, firstly, Ronak, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the invite very much. I'll give a very quick introduction to myself. So my name is Kaya Ismail. I'm the founder of Wordify, and Wordify is a content marketing agency for SaaS and software companies. And we've specialized over the years in the CMS and DXP space. And obviously, along with that comes the headless CMS space. And that's what we're going to discuss today.
Fantastic. And I've read a lot of your content. I think it's fantastic. For anyone who hasn't, I recommend you should check out Kaya's content, especially with Wordify. So yeah, let's get straight into it. In your opinion, what really is a headless CMS and what's all the hype around this lately?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk a lot for a very long time about what headless CMS is and all the different definitions and the argument. There are arguments there still raging on. But I'll try and keep it very, very simple and neutral, so we don't sort of step on any toes, so to speak.
Sure.
So I think the best way to describe what headless CMS is to first describe what traditional CMS is, and then from there we can take it and explain and unbox it. So when you take a traditional CMS, like for example WordPress or Joomla, which most people will be familiar with, when you have your content, you put the content into the back end through what you see is what you get editor, and that content is very tightly coupled with the front end, right? And in WordPress's case, that front end is a WordPress theme or template, which obviously shows the end user presents to the end user on a website, on a web page, right? Or on a mobile, web browser. So that content that you put into WordPress is very tightly stuck to that front end. It can't really be used for much else other than that particular channel. So that is what you call a coupled or a traditional CMS. So the headless CMS movement, that basically what it did is it took the content element and it decoupled it from the front end. It isolated it from the front end. So now it's just purely a content infrastructure. So you can add content to that, and the way that content is distributed is through APIs. So whereas before with a traditional CMS, your content could only ever go to that website template that you've chosen. Now the content is front-end agnostic. It can go to anywhere you want it to go. So it can go to the WordPress template if you want it to, or any other sort of website template or website, however you built the website, whatever technologies. Or you could send it to any landing page. You can send it to another piece of software that publishes it in a different way. You could send it to digital signage, smartwatches, anywhere. You could literally send it anywhere. So APIs allow you to send that content anywhere. And the API-led infrastructure also allows the headless CMS to pull in content from anywhere. So you could connect that headless CMS to an e-commerce platform, for example, a CRM, a sales platform, anything. And you could pull in, for example, if you're talking about e-commerce, you could pull in product information. You can combine that with existing content you have in headless CMS, and that can be pushed out again to anywhere you need to go. So whereas before with the traditional CMS, you had a very linear, your content was very linear, and in order to build any other sort of content experiences outside the website, you needed a whole different type of technology and whole, team sort of build out a new sort of CMS specific for that technology. And you have to do that over and over again. What headless CMS does is it isolates the content, all of your content, allows you to distribute it all from a single point to pretty much anywhere. Right. So I'd say that's probably the definition I'm going to go with for now.
That's a very neutral one as well, because I think it covers everything you need to know about it. But looking back, right, a headless CMS is always really focused on the developer experience, because even if you look at the terminology, it's really been technical to APIs, whether it's RESTful or GraphQL, it doesn't matter, and sort of how it connects to the different frameworks and languages. But with headless CMS coming a bit more into the mainstream, what do you think? I wouldn't say is missing, but what do you think would make it a bit more approachable to editorial teams or marketing teams who really need to maximize the editorial experience that comes out with a headless?
Sure, great question. So this is something that I actually wrote about on cmsy.com a few years back. If I recall correctly, the title was Headless CMS don't forget the marketers,
Yeah.
something like that. You can probably find it if you Google it. And basically what I argued is that the headless CMS movement is fantastic, and it's solving that problem of companies who want to, have an omni-channel experience, or at least a multi-channel experience. They're solving that issue by, decoupling the content from the front end. But what they're not doing is they're not really empowering marketers to go in and build those same experiences in a way they used to be able to do with the traditional CMS. So again, if you go back to WordPress, a marketer would generally have a pretty good tool set available to him or her to go and build out a landing page and design that landing page and drag and drop perhaps and change things, and preview things, right? Although it was a very linear way to do things, and it could only be published to a website or a WordPress template, they had the tool set there. When headless came around, or pure headless at least, that tool set was gone. And it was very difficult for marketers to preview their content. It was very difficult for them to sort of design the content, design the pages. And especially when it came to other channels, right? So when it comes to sort of, designing experiences for smartwatches, or designing experiences for digital signage in restaurants, for example, marketers had no real way to design that experience. So that sort of brings us to the hybrid CMS, or we'll call it hybrid CMS. And what that basically did is, and it's still doing it, I think, we're still seeing a transition of a lot of pure headless CMSs making that transition. They are giving back the marketers those tools that they used to have. So we're seeing what you see is what you get editing. We're seeing content previews. In some instances, we're seeing drag and drop on the front end. And we're slowly transitioning to a place where marketers are going to have the same tools they used to have within a headless environment. So they're going to still have the flexibility, and developers are going to still have the flexibility to build any front end they want and populate that front end with content. But at the same time, marketers will also have the toolkit to design that experience too.
Right. And I think that's a really interesting point you bring up as well, as we transition to the hybrid side of things, because even now, if you look at the hybrid CMS or pure headless, there are methods or integrations in place that really help marketers with previewing their content, albeit with integrations or with expandability. And also they're getting a lot more, I would say, SEO conscious. So marketers are sort of confident in the content they create. But that I like the example you brought up with restaurant signages or watches, because as the whole marketing world or marketers are sort of gearing towards delivering omni-channel experiences that are not just restricted to websites or mobile, what do you think they can leverage in this sort of API first mentality, and why is API content management something that marketing should care about?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. So the reason marketers should care about it, and I think they do care about it, they're just worried about how it's going to be implemented.
Or it's a bit confusing.
Yeah, it's confusing to them because, again, it may have even been the marketers who pushed for they didn't know what they were pushing for, but they wanted omnichannel, right? They wanted, a few years back, I don't know how many years we can say, but let's say 5 years, 6 years ago, where marketers would have seen that, the customer experience is not just the website. We need to have an experience when they come into our bricks and mortar store. We need to have an experience when they're on their smartwatch. We need to have an experience here, there, and everywhere. We need to be omnichannel as much as possible. So they were probably pushing for that, but they just didn't realize that, the first step towards it would pretty much lock them out of the process of designing that. So now that we are transitioning to the hybrid, a more hybrid environment, if you will, each product is different, and each product is making that transition in their own way. The way this is going to help marketers, and the way that marketers should be excited, or what they should be excited about, is that now when they produce content, they can have their content in one place that is not restricted or bound to or coupled to any of those channels that they want. So let's say, again, they've got the website, they've got their smartwatch app, and they've got their bricks and mortars app, and they've got like a whole e-commerce thing going on there, where they're selling things in store, and they're selling things on the smartwatch, and they're selling things on the website. All of their content before, what they do is create content for the website, create content for the smartwatch, and for the brick and store mortar digital signage, right? Now they only have to produce content once, and it can go to all of these different areas. And that, that sort of cuts down on the need of marketers to duplicate their work first and foremost. And it also allows them to design a more consistent experience, right? So if you've got the same content everywhere you go, or everywhere the customer goes, then it seems more seamless. The branding is going to be more correct. That you may be able to reuse the same images again. So there's cost cutting there as well. or different ways where a marketer can sort of streamline their entire process basically of talking, engaging with the customer.
Right.
So when it comes to the API, I think you mentioned like the API centric sort of content environment. That is basically what that is. You have the content in one place, and the APIs do the work of actually sending it where you want it to be sent. And then your dev team will be managing those front ends. They'll be managing the website, they'll be managing the smartwatch interface and the digital signage, but will be populated with your content that you produce once. And you can, again, depending on the product, you can preview what that content looks like to the end user, and you can build out your experience that way.
Right. Thanks. And I really like the point you made about the sort of customer experience and keeping it consistent there, because a lot of companies are starting to refocus on this customer experience. And it's not just with startups or with mid-scale companies, it's really on an enterprise level now, where there's a lot of digitization happening and people are a lot more concerned about, okay, how are we really going to deliver this exceptional customer experience, but keep it consistent across all touch points? So how do you think a sort of headless CMS really gets into this conversation, and how do you think it helps any scale of company, even if it's an enterprise, really deliver on what they want to do with digitization and with the customer experience?
Yeah, so this goes back to what I said before, where a headless CMS, whether pure or hybrid, isn't just a content distribution platform, although that is one of its core features. Because it's API based, it allows your headless CMS to really form the foundation of your digital experience platform, right? And again, DXPs, they have, again, their own definitions. Some would say that the headless CMS itself is the DXP. Others would say it's part of the DXP, right? So let's say, for example, you've got your headless CMS. You've now got a content infrastructure. Okay, you've got a way to distribute your content, and you've got a way to bring content in and redistribute it. So that makes a very good foundation for your digital experience. So now what you can do, again, whether you're a small company or a large company, you can integrate that headless CMS with any other software that you're using to help manage the customer experience. So like I mentioned before, the headless CMS can be at the core, and you connect your CRM, and you connect your e-commerce platform, and you connect your sales platform, you connect social media, all the other stuff you've got that sort of helps run the customer experience, the omni-channel customer experience. It can be connected with the headless CMS through APIs. Once that's connected, now the content that lives on those platforms can be leveraged much more easily. So like I mentioned before, if you're integrating with an e-commerce platform, you can bring in product information from that platform and combine that with the content that you've got. Right, so you can then republish a product, for example, with content from the headless CMS that your marketing's put together, and you've got the product information there as well, and you've got the product images there, and everything to sort of make that an experience, not just a product page. It's now an experience which you've got the content mixed with the commerce. Additionally, it helps with personalization. So if you've got the CRM and your sort of your whole sales suite looped in, then your headless CMS can now, request the customer's information when it puts out content. So there's ways to do that where the content that's being produced or being presented, or banners that are being presented, is using the customer's name, for example, or is personalized to their geolocation, for example. All these different sort of nuances that can be used much more simply. So depending on the sort of third-party systems that need to be integrated, the headless CMS is a really good foundation because, again, of that pulling and pushing using APIs, is able to pull and push data and customer data and content in both ways, and then present it in that front end, however the company wants to present it. So I would say that's probably the best way to explain how it helps.
Okay, and I love that you got into the DXP discussion, because that's something I'm really curious about myself. So just like CMSs, we've always had the sort of monolith era of DXPs. You have the CMS DXP, but you've also had the sort of e-commerce era of DXPs and just the monolith in general. And just like headless is popping up in the CMS world, we're also seeing the sort of emergence of microservices for DXPs, where companies can really choose a best of breed platform for headless commerce, or for fulfillment, or for payments, or for CRM. I mean, they're not really restricted to what this software suite would offer them. So if we look at this trend of DXPs also going in the microservices direction, where they're all connected via API, what do you think of the role that a headless CMS plays in there? How does it sort of help this DXP come together?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, it's the perfect foundation, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, content is needed everywhere. So the customer experience, no matter what channel it's on, it needs content. It needs the customer needs to read content about your brand or your product or your service, and they need to be able to do their own research and investigate your brand, right? So when you've got a headless CMS at the core or the foundation of your DXP, all those other microservices can be integrated, and yeah, it's the perfect. I mean, here's the thing, right? Gartner very recently changed the name of their Magic Quadrant from WCMS to DXPs, right? And that sort of is a nod in the direction of CMSs are becoming the DXPs, or they've become the DXPs, because although not all of them give you the whole suite, they are so integral to the DXP that they may as well be called the DXP, because without them, without that puzzle piece, you don't really have the full picture, right? If you were to take out the CMS, the headless CMS in this case, how would your e-commerce system communicate with the CRM system and the payment system and that system and then this system, and then communicate with your digital signage in your store, right? Where is that technology to bridge those gaps? The technology is the headless CMS, the APIs. So that's how it will connect all together. And that's why Gartner has made that sort of label change where CMSs are now DXPs, because the DXP is either the suite DXP where it's got everything in one, or it is a pure headless, or even if it's a hybrid headless, it may not have all of the different sort of bells and whistles. And in that case, it's ideally placed to help a company embrace that best of breed strategy, because like I just mentioned, with the APIs there, anything is possible. You can connect any third-party tool and bring it all together and publish it wherever you want to publish it.
Right. Great. I mean, I think it's been a really great conversation for me if I look at the previous few minutes, because there's so much that we tend to forget when we think about the CMS. It really sort of brings a lot of everything together. And just as a sort of parting thought, if I had to ask you for your personal opinion on where you see this going, right? Do you think the CMS will continue to sort of be this foundation layer that just houses the content for DXPs to really reach their potential, or do you see the CMS playing a more active role in not just the DXP but the overall customer experience? Do you think there's a sort of impact that a CMS could have for the user or for the customer?
Good question. I mean, I would say, this is not my term, so I haven't coined this term, but content is currency, right? When you have content, you've got currency. When you have a marketing team is producing content for you, it means you can expand into different areas, to different channels, and produce better experiences, right? I mentioned personalization earlier. Right. You can only really, execute a personalization strategy if you've got enough content to do it, right? Because you need enough content to speak to multiple different customer segments at the same time, or different journeys, right? Content to do that, right? So when it comes to headless CMS, again, it's perfectly placed to house all of that content, and selectively deliver all of that content to the right person at the right time. So going back to your question, will a headless CMS play a central role? I think it already is, and I think it's impossible really at the moment anyway to sort of, like I mentioned, sort of take it out of the equation, right? I mean, if you take it out of the equation, nothing is bridged together anymore, right? That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a central content hub that has all your content and distributes it wherever it needs to go, and it's sort of the spokes to the wheel, right? I mean, without it, just nothing really gets to its destination. True. And your content never really gets to the destination, and therefore your personalization strategy doesn't work. So I think it already plays a very integral role, and I don't really see that changing. I think we're going to see, again, like we mentioned earlier, more headless CMSs transitioning into the hybrid space where they're offering the API architecture, but they're also offering marketers their tool set, simply because this is now becoming the norm, right? Where the content is all in one place, but it needs to be designed, and it needs a marketer's touch before it reaches that end user on any of the channels that company is using.
Right.
And I think that's where we're heading. I think that transition is happening now, and I think we're now seeing more and more companies again integrating their content with their commerce a bit more. We're seeing commerce websites where it's not just selling; it's talking about information, and they've got pages and pages of content, and they're giving their customers, not just information on individual products, but information about the industry, information about that topic, right? Whatever it is they're selling. And Headless CMS just empowers that whole movement, and that kind of movement is, let's not forget, this isn't something that marketers and developers are doing from thin air. They think it might work. This is literally just answering the market. The market wants that. The market, every consumer in every industry is hungry for content, right? So if you've got an e-commerce platform and you're not delivering that content, they're going to go and read that content somewhere else. But every company wants to be that source of content, that source of information, that source of education, and Headless CMS allows them to do that on a massive scale and on a personalized scale, in a personalized way as well. So to answer your question, extremely central, extremely integral, and I can't see that changing anytime soon.
Fantastic. I mean, I'm really excited to see what's going to change with this emergence of microservices, and as everything gets a bit more API focused, it's really an interesting space to be in right now. So, really, I've loved this conversation. Thanks a lot for your insights, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up your socials on the screen now. So everyone who's looking for some great content, I highly recommend taking a look at Wordify. And yeah, you can get in touch with Kaya through Twitter. Is that still the preferred way, or do you prefer emails right away?
Yeah, Twitter or LinkedIn, both
Twitter or LinkedIn. There we go. Perfect. Well, Kaya, thanks a lot. And yeah, it's been a really great conversation.
Thank you for having me.